Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to AnTalk. Happy Halloween. Has anyone ever heard of the comic book series Wytches? Wytches is an ongoing comic book of the horror genre. So far, Volume 1 is out and consists of 6 issues that first started being released in October of 2014. Published by Image Comics, written by Scott Snyder with art done by Jock, with Matt Hollingsworth providing some interesting coloring, and lettering done by Clem Robbins. You can find Wytches Volume 1 in a single book as one story, which is how I read it. I've never read a horror comic before, and I wanted to find some material to cover this Halloween season. Zach actually lent me this book, so I figured I'd give it a shot. So I'll give you my overall thoughts on it and a little bit of what the story's about before I get into spoilers. Like I said, I've never read a horror-based comic book or graphic novel before, so I was curious to see how this is. Even the cover is actually pretty creepy and mysterious, which is just like how the book is. I really wasn't sure how much I was going to like this, but it definitely kept my interest, and it's definitely creepy and has some disturbing images and ideas. When you try to replay what you just read along with the artwork in your head, you come up with some pretty scary stuff. I think what Scott Snyder did here was pretty creative, in all honesty. It has a certain mythology that I think is pretty interesting, and it really grabs you, especially right off the bat in the beginning when you really don't know what the hell is going on. Now, having said all that, if horror or witches or disturbing thoughts or anything like that isn't really your thing, then you might not enjoy this that much. It is very much a horror story and has a very dark tone. While mysterious, I would say that the story is pretty straightforward. The plot moves pretty fast, but I would say that's pretty common when it comes to reading comics or graphic novels at the speed of which you might read them. Before I spoil this or go too deep into my review, let me at least explain the opening pages or panels, and I think that will give you a pretty good idea if this will hold your interest or not. So the story starts off with some pretty creepy images of the woods. As we close in on one tree in particular, we can see there's a voice coming from it. Please, please help me. We then see a woman trapped inside the hollow of the tree, trying to speak through a small hole. Please get me out of here, anyone. They're coming. Then a little boy appears. Mom, where have you been? And what are you doing in there? Then we hear there's a noise coming from beneath her. She struggles and desperately tries to climb through the hole in the tree. She then asks her son to pick up a rock and try to bash the bark to help her get out. Hurry, Tim, hurry. She tells him, someone pledged me to them. I was pledged. Please, Tim, get me out. So Tim then picks up the rock, and then BAM! He smashes her right in the face with it, taking her nose off. Obviously looking at the boy confused, he says, pledged is pledged. Then you see a pair of witch hands grab her by the face and then pull her back into the tree. The final text on the page, Cray Family, August 1919. So yeah, I think that first opening few pages really sets the tone for what this book is like. And if you don't like that, you probably won't like the book. And if you're interested so far, this might be your thing. We then jump to 2014, where we focus in on the Rooks family. The father, Charlie, who's an author of children's books. The mother, Lucy, who's in a wheelchair due to a car accident. And the daughter, Sailor. They are a family that has moved to a new town, and they're trying their best to settle in after a traumatic event that took place in their old town involving Sailor and the unexplained death of one of her classmates. Sailor, who's had issues with panic attacks, I can't remember if that's since the incident or it's been a problem her whole life, but recently it definitely has been a reoccurring issue. And when strange things start to happen to her in this new town, she starts to struggle with her sanity. Are these things really happening, or is she just going crazy? I think this story touches on fears other than just the witches in the woods, but the fear of a teenager who's been through a lot in the past, trying to adjust to a new school, a new town, and hasn't been given the warmest welcome, plus the fear of a parent that I can't really relate to because I'm not a parent, but the relationship between father and daughter, and as we see through flashbacks, they haven't always had the greatest of relationships, with a father who's been distant and so caught up in work, and a confused adolescent daughter. Just as their relationship tries to get back on track, confusing and weird things start to happen to Charlie and his daughter Sailor in their new town. I even think the motives of the story's evil and the people condoning it are really rooted in humans' desires and selfishness. But one more thing before I get into spoilers. Like I said already, I find the artwork to be very intriguing. Not only does it set a real creepy tone, the images have what is basically a layer of color splatter over them, making a lot of the images hard to make out or to tell what the hell it is you're even looking at. This at times can be a little annoying, I guess, but it's still kind of a cool effect and leaves a lot up to the brain's imagination. I feel like it can be as scary as your mind will take it, which I think a lot of good stories, or especially horror, should do this to some degree, whether it's movies, comics, or whatever. So yeah, if you're a comic book / horror fan and Wytches is not on your radar, you might want to check it out. But now I'm going to get into spoilers and give you some of my thoughts on some more specific things in this story. So I don't want to give away the whole ending, but I am going to touch on some spoilers now. So if you don't want anything from Wytches spoiled, spoilers now, this is your warning. So as I mentioned before, weird things start happening to Sail as they move to a new town. The reason they move is Sailor had a bully, a bad one. Her name was Annie, and one night she had her all alone out in the woods, where she was harassing her at gunpoint and even threatens to kill her. Then they start hearing something in the trees. And then when Annie goes to check out what's making such a noise, she's grabbed by these freaky witch arms and pulled into the tree, snapping her in half, never to be seen again. They could never explain her death, but there is no evidence to put Sailor away, so Charlie, the father, moves his family hoping to find a fresh start. Obviously, news travels fast, and rumors that Sailor killed that girl have reached the new town. On her way to school, she sees an old woman out in the woods. You can see that she's saying pledge. Pledge. Just like the little boy in the beginning. What does this mean? At this point, I'm pretty hooked, and I find this story to be pretty creative, and like I said already, I like the mythology that seems to be behind it. And I just like the whole idea of these witches in the woods pulling people into trees back to wherever they came from. But what exactly are they, and what is their motive? One night, Sail is in bed when she hears someone outside her window. She sees a very grotesque being who she thinks is Annie. The witch-like figure breaks in through the window and leaves Sail with a bite. After the bite eventually grows and manifests, it starts to call and draw her to the woods, which she then eventually does go to. And then she does indeed find the witches. As they close in on her, we are left to assume she's taken. On her way to the woods, she actually runs into her Uncle Reggie, and he actually follows her into the woods and goes missing with her. You never find out what happens to him. It's actually an unsolved mystery of the book. Meanwhile, her father has an encounter with the old woman from the woods, who breaks in and attacks him. She basically tells him that the witches are after his daughter and that someone pledged her to them. After Sail goes missing, Charlie really starts to lose it. He thinks he's going crazy, but at the same time he knows this is real, and he means to find his daughter. He then gets a clue to meet the old woman again, where she gives him some more info on the witches. They are ancient beings. The old woman describes them as possible evolution gone wrong and or mutations thousands of years old. She gives him some stuff to rub on, which is basically to hide his scent or the scent of his hormones, which is what the witches are attracted to. They use the wants and the desires of others to get what they want in return. People pledge other people, a lot of times children, and in return they find items and things out in the woods of the supernatural. Things that can cure illness and make you live much longer than normal. Basically the witches' magic. The witches like to eat humans and boil them alive in their cauldrons. The old woman also gives him a list of names of people in the town that he should not trust. People that have been helping out and pledging people for the witches for years. Someone obviously pledged Sailor, but who and why? This is the mystery that keeps on going through the story. I like what we find out about the witches, but at the same time, I like that we still don't know everything. After Sailor is taken, the next time we see her, she wakes up in what appears to be the witch's lair, and she wakes up on top of a giant pile of kids' clothes. And it's pretty horrific to think and imagine all the victims they've had over the years, judging how big this pile of clothes is. She tries to work and climb her way out, but then fails when she runs right into one of the witches. I know this is my spoiler segment, but I still don't want to ruin the ending and twist for you. So I'll just say that Charlie then finds out how to get through to the witch's lair through a portal in a tree, which takes him to their underground world. That I imagine is supernatural or mystical in some way, kind of like you can't physically dig it up and find their lair. Like you gotta go through the portal basically. But I feel the ending is pretty decent. I feel like the twist or reveal of who pledged Sailor makes it all that more intriguing. Charlie is also left to make the ultimate sacrifice that he very willingly accepts because of the love he has for his daughter, even though he's had to redeem himself quite a bit for not always being the best dad. There's definitely room for expansion and continuation of this story, but I thought Volume 1 stands alone by itself pretty well. It's pretty simple and not a very long read, but I think it's pretty cool. And it does give us some information, but at the same time, it does leave a lot open for the imagination to build upon. And like I said, make this as scary as you really want it to. This might not go down as one of my all-time favorites, but I would definitely be open to reading what comes next. And like I said, if you're into horror or into comics, you might want to check this out. But I think it really comes down to what your tastes are. You might really be into this, it might be your thing, or you might not enjoy it at all. It really comes down to, your preference, I think. But that's Wytches, written by Scott Snyder. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And tell me, what's your favorite horror story or comic?